Let me pull up this story here. We got from the Post Millennial.
Oh, my.
Joe Rogan and James Lindsay point out how the left smears everyone they disagree with as alt-right. On the latest episode of the podcast, Joe Rogan spoke with James Lindsay about why so many people are deemed alt-right by the left. And the story's about me. So special thanks to James and Joe, because I don't even think they were necessarily defending me, just pointing out facts, just denying this. What happened was, this guy, Josh Zepps, who is a statist propagandist in Australia, who really doesn't like me because I've criticized their country, and he makes things up, and boy, is he triggered by me. He said, you know, oh, Tim Pool says these things and blah, blah, blah. And then a few seconds later goes, so these alt-right guys who are, you know, saying this stuff. And then Joe cuts him off and he's like, Tim Pool's not alt-right. You can't just say that, man. That's not true. And he's like, well, I didn't mean, and then he says, I don't think Maajid Nawaz is alt-right. I know him, but Tim Pool. So Joe Rogan's talking to James. And they end up bringing me up specifically, and Joe's like, I know Tim very well. He's like a centrist. He was a boots on the ground guy for Vice. And then James like, yeah, he was in Occupy. So this is what I think is it shows the lies. It's obvious they're lying. One of the most powerful media shows in the world, Joe Rogan's show, is outright just with no remorse calling out the lies. I think this is a good example of the narrative is breaking before our eyes. You know what? I know there's a lot of reasons why we said the narrative is breaking, but here's another really good one. It involves me, so obviously I wanted to highlight it and say thank you to Joe for just being honest and talking about, you know, my views and everything. But who's going to believe this anymore?
Well, I was thinking maybe this is alt-right in the sense that it's alternative to the polarized right. It's more of a center.
Alt-right means white nationalists.
That's the problem with
specifically.
That's the problem with the phrase. It shouldn't mean that it's further right than people on the right. It's just an alternative to weird polarized politics.
That's literally not the case.
It just crossed my mind a couple weeks ago.
The Associated Press put out a statement years ago saying the alt-right group that coined the term specifically referenced white nationalist ideology. That's where the term came from. That's what it represents. That's why the left will try to passively smear everyone as alt-right, so they can then add to your Wikipedia page something like Ian's been called alt-right. Then another outlet will say many news organizations have noted that Ian, who's considered alt-right, and then eventually they can just say Ian is alt-right. Then they can then say Ian is a white nationalist and put it on your Wikipedia page. That's the game they play. It's not working anymore. It's falling apart because people are getting sick and tired of it, and they're not scared to call out the bunk media. And you know what it is? As the media ratings collapse, people are getting less scared of being smeared because they're irrelevant.
It's also a way to shut you up. They can't engage you with your ideas. So, like if someone said, "I don't want open borders," well, then you're racist because you don't like Mexican people. But no, because there's a reason why I don't think this is effective. It's you know, racist, sexist. It's all the things. It's to shut us up because they don't want to have this debate. And people on the left they're not good at debating because they don't get those other ideas coming at them. If you're on the right, you get all the ideas. You watch Colbert, you watch The Culture, you read the news. You're experiencing, even by default, all these different concepts, and you're able to kind of, you know, work with them, talk about them, debate them. But if you're on the left, you're in this bubble area, and you can't debate, so you have to smear.
Well, shout out to Hunter Avallone for having come on this show a while back, because, you know, I respect him for coming on the show, and he was having, you know, traditional liberal views, but man, don't come on a show unprepared and be arrogant about it. That's what I would say. So, you know, the issue with him was he brought up he brought up Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Ukraine, Burisma, and he didn't know anything about it. So when I said Joe Biden did engage in a quid pro quo, a corruption in Ukraine to empower his son and make money for his family, and Hunter was like, that's not true. I was like, bro, I can name every person. I've read the reports. I've read Ukrainian news. I've read Russian news. I've read Matt Taibbi's reporting. I have dug through that to a great deal. And I asked him, do you know the name of the guy who started Burisma? And he was like, no. And I'm like, okay, look, with all due respect, why would you step up and claim you know something, and then when I ask you a simple question, you just outright say, I don't know anything about it? It's a weird arrogance that exists. But
Joe
like you
Biden
said,
bragged about it.
They don't know any of this because they don't actually have these debates. So when someone comes into a debate and their first experience with this is, I remember what Hassan said. He said it's not true. And then I'm like, I actually can pull up all of the facts and show you. Do you want to see the Ukrainian news outlets talking about this guy fleeing the country? No, they don't read the news. They don't. They listen to each other, and they have a big circle of people who are jerks. We try to keep it family friendly. So
I respect that.
They're very happy in that circle, but they're also completely
Satisfied.
out of touch.
They're on that island.
To the outside. Yeah, that's probably what happens on that island, to be completely honest with you.
But Joe Biden bragged about that. I mean, can we not forget that?
it's amazing that Joe
He
Biden
was like thrilled about it.
He's like, I did it. I had a quid pro quo, and the media's like, no, he didn't.
Right.
That's you got to be a special kind of either stupid or deceptive to be going online claiming it never happened when we all watched the video of Joe Biden doing it. And Joe Biden's so dumb, he bragged about it.
I think the scariest thing for me about media bias today is that we can see things or hear things in their context, and the media will say, no, it didn't happen. That scares me to death. It really scares me.
Well, it used to scare me. Now I just laugh about it.
But people believe it, though. That's the thing that really upsets me.
But their ratings are in the gutter. Yeah. So I know their ratings are still high. Colbert gets like 3 million viewers or whatever. I just really loved when Joe Biden was doing the press conference and they were like, you know, if you don't pass these voter reform bills, what do you think's going to happen? Joe's like, well, there's a very good chance it could be illegitimate. And then Jen Psaki comes out the next day. No, actually, he didn't say that.
Right.
What he said was Trump is the problem.
Right.
It reminds me of when that episode of Family Guy where Lois Griffin is running for office and she gets up to the podium and she goes, 9/11, and they go, yay, start clapping and cheering. And then they're like, how would you deal with the economy? And she goes, 9/11, yeah, and they'll start clapping and cheering.
She stole that from Rudy Giuliani. That's not fair.
Yeah.
And I'm reminded of the Orwell quote that we talked about on the show previously before that says, quote, the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. And there's a lot of truth to that, especially when you see them call out stuff that clearly does happen, that clearly is a reality, and them saying, no, this never happened. Don't look at the evidence. Don't question it. If you do, you're a bad person. You're a part of the alt-right. You're, a homophobic,
that means
racist,
you're a white nationalist
person.
Also, if it does turn out that the GOP takes a lot of extra seats or whatever in the 2022 in the midterms, and the Democrats then start saying that the election was illegitimate, we're going to be able to look back on this moment and be like, you said it wouldn't be. Now what are you talking about? It's just such a little trap for them.
I want to give a special shout out to the disinformation cycle. It starts with the New York Times reporting that Ukrainians were interfering in the U.S. election to benefit Hillary Clinton. That it was actually, let me be very careful and precise. It was Politico that reported this. It was the New York Times that also reported that a Ukrainian court had found that certain interests in Ukraine, certain individuals were engaged in this behavior. And then it comes to Ted Cruz, who appears on Meet the Press, and he's asked by it was a guy Meet the Press. What's his face?
The guy
Chuck Todd?
Is it Chuck
Yeah,
Todd?
I think so.
Is it Chuck Todd? I don't know. He's asked,
face?
do you really believe that Ukraine interfered in the election? And Ted Cruz is like, Politico and the New York Times reported they did. And then you hear one of the producers at MSNBC start laughing, or NBC just start laughing. And then I'm just like, Ted Cruz cited mainstream news and they laugh at him like he's wrong because they don't read the news. Then our good friend David Pakman does a segment about it where he's like, I can't believe how dumb Ted Cruz is. They're laughing at him. And I'm like, David, did you Google the stories? They're real. But they don't read the news. So they're like, those of us that read the news, like on this show, we have an eclectic bunch of people of varying political beliefs, and we read the news. So we kind of agree on what some of the basic facts are, like many of them. And then we disagree on policy positions, but it's right wing. It's just shuffle everyone into the alt-right bucket if you read the news.
Well, we read the same news. That's the problem. Is there's lots of news out there that I don't read that never comes up on this show or is even orbited on this show because it seems fake. It seems like media narrative.
I don't know. I read not yesterday morning because I had food poisoning, but most mornings I read at least the headlines of pretty much everything.
What's your process like?
Real quick,
So I can tell you.
Just put a pin real quick because I want to mention we've cited NPR, we've cited NJ.com, we've cited so we've hinted at Mother Jones. We've hinted at Reuters. Yo, we use establishment press on this show. We just fact checked these stories. Like the other day, I specifically pointed out that I used NPR on purpose for one source. I used CNN on purpose. If I can fact check what CNN says and find it to be true, I'll use them as a source to say, okay, not telling me CNN's wrong. This is one of the funniest things. I was accused of peddling misinformation about the election because I quoted CNN. That's the point. So I can be like, wow, CNN's fake news, I guess. But anyway, sorry.
No, I check everything in the morning. I check Fox, I check NPR, I check the New York Times and Washington Post, check Daily Wire. I checked through everything we ran overnight at the Post Millennial that I didn't see.
Do you go website to website, or do you look at it through a portal like Twitter?
Honestly, like I have it on my phone.
Oh, cool.
And so like
And-
I
and-
just check everything.
And I'll stress.
I always check Reuters.
My reporting on Ukraine and everything I read, Politico reported that Ukrainians did interfere in the election, and the New York Times ruled a court in Ukraine had found that to be true as well. That's the New York Times and Politico. I'm not cherry picking my news sources. I actually look for counterpoints. There aren't any. So I went to Ukraine and I hit up a source I had in Ukraine and said, can you investigate this from local news sources? And then when I reported on it, I said, I don't know the credibility of these outlets. It's a local Ukrainian outlet I'm not familiar with, but this is what they reported. It backs up what these national outlets, Politico and the New York Times, have said. So for me, for everybody here, I think the issue for us is that we actually fact check the stories. So we have an understanding of reality. But when Chuck Todd on Meet the Press laughs at Ted Cruz, or his producers do, because Ted Cruz cited the New York Times, that's a special level of stupid coming out of NBC.
It's interesting that
and very on brand.
to think that a corporation would feed you a little bit of falsity, get you to believe it, and then ridicule you for believing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's been a lot of crazy news stories of them just absolutely inverting reality to what is just totally the complete opposite.
2 seconds to pull that up.
Exactly. And it's not that hard to fact check. It's not that hard to look at sources. It's not that hard to get a different side of the story. It's becoming more and more difficult, especially when it comes to using Google. And I think they're catching on to that. But we have an opportunity in our life where we have this small window that's closing where we could look up anything at any moment and find out exactly what we want about it. That window, I believe, is closing. It's still here. We should still use it as much as we can.
2 seconds. I can pull up these stories from Politico and the New York Times.
not that
Mainstream establishment outlets talking about this very fact that NBC, their talking heads, make fun of Ted Cruz for. There's a lot of things you can make fun of Ted Cruz for. Like, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't wrong on the facts. So when pundits like David Pakman go on his show and he laughs at Ted Cruz for being right, I'm just like, I messaged David and I was like, hey, like, here's the link to the stories, bro. Like, you just had to Google it. I don't understand why you're laughing at Ted Cruz or mocking him for this.
There's something about this story, this Biden-Ukrainian scandal, that's a little vague, that makes me tired whenever it comes up. Like, I feel like it requires more glucose to process the information for some reason. I don't know why.
I know what you mean. It does kind of feel that way. It's like
It's
more of
layered.
this,
It's
more
complicated.
of this
It's not
Ukraine thing.
certain stories are just like a punch to the face. This one, it's more.
Requires
You got to
work.
dig in. Yeah.
Yo, to explain this story to my friend's dad, I was like, have a seat, sir.
List of characters.
Because what happens is you can start slow and let them ask you questions. Like, a video emerged of Joe Biden bragging about engaging in a quid pro quo where he would withhold $1 billion in U.S. aid to Ukraine unless they fired a prosecutor.
That's extortion, right?
Well, you can call it whatever you want. It's illegal.
Okay.
That Joe Biden doesn't have the authority to stop something that was
it's
passed
not.
by
It's not
Congress.
extortion if the president does it,
Well,
right?
No,
and
but
the,
he wasn't president at the time. This was back when he was vice
He
president.
was vice president.
And the vice president and president can't go and say, I am going to personally halt an act of Congress. So they accused Trump of doing that, when in fact Joe Biden literally did it.
And Joe
we know
Biden-
he did
yeah.
it. And he bragged about it. And then the media comes on and says, Joe Biden never did that.
And he wanted the prosecutor fired because the prosecutor was investigating Burisma, where his son was a chair, was like on the board there.
And Viktor Shokin, the prosecutor in Ukraine who got fired, signed a sworn affidavit saying the president came to me and said, Joe Biden wants you fired because you're investigating Burisma.
Wow.
Matt Taibbi
Yeah.
reported this.
Well,
and he
and-
reported there were a dozen plus investigations from the prosecutor into Burisma every step of the way. There have been sycophantic establishment journalists who have been like, well, Burisma wasn't even under investigation. And then journalists are like, here's the investigations.
Yeah.
Well, but those were not about...
What were they investigating them for?
So Mykola Zlochevsky is just the general surface answer is corruption, kickbacks, forged documents, just you name it. When it comes to trying to steamroll things through, my personal view of this, after everything I've read, walking the story back to explain it to like my friend's dad, it's the Qatar Turkey pipeline. It's trying to get natural gas into Europe, trying to compete with Russia and the Gazprom natural gas monopoly. It's around 20% that goes into Europe comes from Gazprom through Ukraine. So U.S. interests, NATO, Western allies wanted to get an alternative source of fuel to lower the prices. They needed a means to do it. So they prop up this company. They have a guy who engages in a little, behind the scenes to make it work faster. There's like a CIA director who's on the board along with Hunter Biden, who has no business being on the board. And in the era of the internet, we can learn these things. They got really mad it was happening. Joe Biden's a moron and bragged about it. And all of a sudden, it looks like you can see at least the surface of what they were trying to do with Syria, with Turkey, with Iraq, with Iran, with Ukraine, what they're still trying to do with Ukraine. Trump really messed all those plans up. Because Trump, I just think, didn't care about their plans, saw the video of Joe Biden engaging in what appeared to be illegal activity and is illegal activity, and then called the president of Ukraine and said, I saw this video. This is literally happened. He's like, I saw this video of Joe Biden saying he was going to do this. Can you look into that for me? Mm-hmm. And then they were like, impeach him. We got to impeach him now. And then they handcrafted this insane story about Trump quid pro quo, which was actually Joe Biden. Here's the best part. People on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter who named the CIA guy, and don't say his name, please, they got all their content deleted. Amazing. I had videos deleted for telling the story. I made a post. You post any of these stories and they would disappear without warning. It was so obvious what they were doing.
I figured out why it has been confusing me is because they've been blaming Trump for the same thing that Biden did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's correct.
Amazing. Watching it happen, like being in the news. And it's like Joe Biden walks over and kicks a dog. And then the media goes, breaking news, Trump kicked a dog. And I'm like, but what?
Well,
he did literally kick the dog.
And now Biden is definitely going to go to war for Ukraine.
Yeah,
I know,
it's amazing.
Doesn't look like it.
You know?
It's usually for oil, for a resource if it's a war.
Trump wasn't supposed to win. Trump was not supposed to win. I was in Ukraine at the Maidan protests when all this was erupting, when Yanukovych got ousted, when Ukraine was in that turmoil period. And it was that Western forces, and this is just my opinion as one person who covered a little bit of it, and I'm probably wrong on a lot of this, but my view was, obviously, the West wanted to get Ukraine under the fold. They want to get cheaper gas into Europe. That was part of the plan. Russia doesn't want that to happen. It's against their interests. Syria is allied with Russia. This whole region is embroiled in this conflict. Trump gets elected. Everything stops. Syria, he's trying to withdraw our troops from Syria. They won't let him. They lie about it. Trump is like, why do I care about Ukraine? Just give him some weapons and be done with it. Biden gets back in and all of a sudden, oh no. It's like the amazing thing is after Trump got elected, the whole Ukraine civil war narrative stops and just like goes off the news cycle. Biden gets back in and here we are, Ukrainian civil war all over again.
It's all over. Yeah, it's back.
Amazing.
But they were still fighting between in Ukraine between some Russian forces and the separatists.
Yes, but I went there.
But it was still at a standstill compared to of how hot it was comparatively to when John McCain was there and how.
And I went to Ukraine. I think I went there. It may have been just before Trump got elected. And in this period, my sources on the ground, just locals, they're not like experts, said the fighting had mostly subsided and they were no longer, they said, don't call it a civil war. That pisses people off. And I was like, when I was here and when I left, it escalated to the point where the Eastern separatists, no. It's separatist conflict and it's like, it's anti-government extremism. I'm like, oh, okay. And then for years, we barely hear anything about it. Joe Biden gets in and all of a sudden we're being told Russia's about to invade Ukraine. Okay, dude.
Yeah, they were going at Putin until Trump got elected. Then they were going at Trump for being connected to Putin. Then Trump left. Now they're going back at Putin. This whole boogeyman thing is so annoying.
Well, one of the things is you've got the bureaucratic state, the intelligence agencies. They have plans that exist well beyond.
Yeah, I think they're playing the 100-year game as well as the CCP. I think they're both playing the 100-year game.
Trump was not supposed to win. When Trump got in office, all of a sudden their plans were completely disrupted. So anyway, this all started because I obsess over this stuff because this was one of the most egregious things that's ever happened in American history. A president was impeached over a lie to maintain bureaucratic policies that existed before he got in office. And it just shows you that the emperor has no clothes. No one's playing by the rules anymore. And any semblance of if you think the president has real power, you underestimate the intelligence agencies and the bureaucratic state. That's what we can see here. That beyond the president, there's a reason why Trump was jammed up the entirety of his first term, because Trump was not supposed to be the guy to win. And he wanted to shore up our borders. He wanted to bring the troops home. He wanted to go America first, build up our factories. And he did not want to play that international game. And they got mad about it. So everything, they accused him of working with Russia, which was a lie. Then they did the impeachment. Then they did the other impeachment. And now they're trying to prosecute him over fraud in New York so he can't run for office. It's crazy. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Now, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. all of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about. So you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.